Well, hello everyone and welcome to the City of Burlington Board of Finance meeting. It's Tuesday, April 9th, 2024 at 5:33 p.m. And we are going to begin first with, I'd like to call the Board of Finance meeting to order. And we first start with our agenda, and I'd like to accept a motion on the agenda. Item 1.1 to amend or adopt the agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to adopt the agenda.
So moved by Councilor Barlow. Is there a second?
Just as a point of information, I believe that Councilor Barlow, does that include the removal of consent agenda items 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4?
We're doing a consent agenda motion. Right? Or we're doing it on the first agenda?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, so let's redo the motion then.
I will move to amend the agenda to remove which items?
3.2, 3.3, and 3.4.
3.2, 3.3, and 3.4, and consent agenda. And move the amended agenda as amended.
Councilor Barlow. So that's the first. Is there a second?
Second that.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Gaddis. Any discussion on this? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion carries unanimously. Now we're going to move on to public forum. So with public forum, are there any members of the public wishing to speak to the Board of Finance? And we'll first look to folks in the room, and then we'll go online. So if anyone would like to address the Board of Finance, please raise your hand in the room. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone hiding back there. So we'll move to online, or is there anyone online who would like to address us in public forum?
Yes, we do have former Councillor Sharon Busher, and I will enable her microphone.
You should be all set, Sharon.
Hi, good afternoon. And for Councillor Barlow and for Catherine Shadd, they're familiar with me making comments. For the rest of you, I do follow the Board of Finance because I think I want to know where my money goes. So that's just it. I just wanted to comment briefly on a couple of things on your agenda, although you've modified it. So forgive me if I am speaking to something that was removed. The first thing has to do with the budget neutral amendment. And I just wanted to say that I understand that impacts this year's budget, but it also sets the stage for FY25, where there will be some savings realized, and I'm pleased to see that. And I also am hoping that the events around the solar eclipse will really augment the rooms and meals and sales tax in a very pleasant way for us, so that we will garner more revenue that way. So I'm looking forward to understanding that impact on us. The second thing I wanted to comment, normally I don't comment on a number of things, but this is important to me. The Burlington Fire Department and their community response team, I know they hear a lot from elected officials, but as someone who's just a citizen, I just want them to know how much I value them and how much I appreciate that this was a team initiative and it was incredibly successful for the people in our community. And I don't think that words really capture how thankful so many people are. I understand that tonight you're looking to continue the pilot until you can utilize the rest of the funding, which brings you to June 16th. I'm hoping that the Board of Finance and the mayor will consider at least bringing it to the end of the fiscal year. And if I believe it's valuable to continue in FY25, but I will look to the fire department and the administration to set the stage for that conversation. So I just want to thank them all. The next thing is a request, and this might be something that's off the agenda, but it was the Colchester, Riverside, Barrett, Mill Street intersection, and it's not the funding. So as everyone knows, the Winooski Bridge and that intersection are going to be upgraded, and it's been a lengthy process. And that's really why I'm speaking to it. I was involved because I was on the council, but it's gone through a number of different eyeballs, and I think it's a coordinated, good plan. But when there are meetings for this project that are held by regional planning, it's a large group of people with a lot of different agendas. So I'm going to ask DPW to please, when you come in with your finalized project plan, which I hope is pretty much like what everyone believes it is and saw initially, that they could potentially come to the Ward 1 NPA to allow the residents that actually live right in that vicinity to see that final plan and ask some questions. It's almost impossible to really focus on just this item when there are those large meetings. So I'm making that request to all of you. I think Ward 1 people would really appreciate it. And then the last thing is for your discussion. I did reach out to Director Pine to try to save you from hearing all my questions, but I take it really seriously when we consider selling a property that we own, that the city owns. And we have sold properties. I mean, we sold the property that City Market downtown. We have sold properties, and I think sometimes I at least regret some of those sales. So I'm hoping that you will look at that and look at if this still is in everyone's best interest. I understand the repairs, they're always what gets us, are one of the driving factors, but I also understand written into the lease is that in the third term of the lease that BT can kind of nudge the city out of that space. I'm really worried about where HR and payroll will go and the cost of rental space downtown. So I'm hoping that all of you look at that and look at all of the options available to you, and not see this as a fixed proposal that can't be reconsidered if it's in the city's best interest and the taxpayers' best interest. Thank you so much for hearing all my comments.
Thank you, former Councilor Sharon Busher. We appreciate that. Are there any other folks online who would like to offer public comment? Or in the room, change your minds and like to speak? Okay, so seeing no one further wanting to address us, public forum is now closed. Moving on to item 3 on the agenda, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda as amended and take the actions indicated?
I do see that Councilor Grant.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's back up. Councilor Grant, would you like to offer a public comment? Councilor Grant? We can't hear you if you are trying to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
I am so sorry about that. I had a comment about the consent item 3.6. I guess just in terms of, I know this had been previously discussed, I think it was even the last REIB committee meeting, but I guess I was surprised to see it put on the consent agenda after the last conversation. I guess if we're going to be using the grant monies, any grant monies, I for just future reference would like to see these discussed through the REIB committee meetings. I don't know, I guess I kind of felt blindsided by seeing these items put on for approval. There was some discussion that, yes, definitely these are 2 great organizations. I do support them, but had a concern about making sure that we are teaching these organizations to fish, given the fact that we have this deficit that we have to take care of. we want to know that they're getting assistance with looking for grants to cover some of these expenses and not relying on entirely onto the city, just so that we can help them ensure their continuity in the community. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Grant. I appreciate it. So we're back on public comment. Is there anyone else for public comment? Going once, going twice. All right, I think I'm confidently leading us forward here now to item 3. I'm trying to get you all to smile over there a little bit too. Okay, it's okay. We'll get through this. All right. So moving on now to item number 3, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda as amended and take the actions indicated?
So moved.
All right, moved by Councilor Travers. Any second? Second. Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Any discussions on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Moving right along. All right, moving on now to our deliberative agenda. Let's move on to item 4.1 now. Just find your computer. So on item 4.1, we have, let's see, I think this is CEO Chad, who's right next to me, who is I'm gonna invite next to me to speak, to give us a brief summary on the issue before we have any discussion by the board.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This was an item that Sharon Busher mentioned, a budget neutral amendment. That those of you who were on last year's council might recall. It's a follow-up to the budget to actual reports that we have started producing. And it is in response to those reports, we have realized that there is, as you can see, $700,000 worth of revenue that we have determined is not achievable. And it's important to note that these two items, the $500,000 of miscellaneous revenue and the $200,000 of purchasing savings, has been in our general fund budget for many years. But these items look back even beginning in 2019. So for the past 5 years, these are not items that we have been able to realize. So if you look back in previous budgets, we have 0 budgeted for purchasing savings, and we've never gotten more than 20 or 30,000 for miscellaneous revenue. So I think at this point, after further discussion, both in the CT office as well as with our mayors, we've realized that those are things that should not be in the FY24 budget, and we won't be budgeting in FY25 because they're not things we can count on. So we also need to commensurately reduce expenses. And so part of that budget to actuals report showed us where we could do that. And you can see that below, and that involves some of our departments that have not staffed up as much as we thought, including city attorney, clerk treasurer's office, and the REIB, all of whom have had less staffing than we would like, but that has resulted in having some extra money left over that will make up for that shortfall in revenue. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Dr. Robert?
Yes, thank you for this. I'm curious to know if this was contemplated in some of the earlier presentations that we had when we were discussing the $9 million shortfall. Is this already sort of netted out and all? I mean, it's neutral for the next year for the fiscal 25 budget. Is this already sort of contemplated as coming out of there in some some of the earlier presentations that you've given?
It is not included in that $9 million. Part of what makes up that $9 million was $4 million of one-time money. And that had more to do with ARPA and the assigned fund balance and less to do with revenues that we were not going to realize. So you are correctly identifying that this would increase that hole.
That's important. Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Carpenter?
Is the CRT expenses anticipated as well in the 25 budget?
Right now, the CRT is being paid for by opioid money. So that is totally a separate funding stream, and that's how it is continuing. That's how we are forecasting FY25 at this time.
Any other questions? Sure, let's speed ahead here, okay? How would the board like to proceed on this item?
I'll make the motion as recommended on CityPlace.
Do I read that out for the sake of folks listening from home?
We don't usually.
We don't really. Okay. I think it makes it more an
Yes.
accessible meeting, frankly, so folks know
does.
what we're doing. So I'm gonna go ahead and read that if that's okay. I'm actually gonna read this version.
Mhm.
All right. I don't know why I'm asking permission. I'm just gonna, would you read it, Councilor Barlow? I think that's just a good way for us to make sure people know where we are in the meeting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I move to approve and recommend that the city council approve and authorize the city's chief administrative officer or their designee to execute a budget amendment to reduce the CT budget by $700,000 and to reduce expenses by a total of $700,000 in the CT, REIB, CA, and assessor departments per attached.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow, for that motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Travers. And any further discussion on this item before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, CEO. Appreciate that. And these memos have really improved over the years since I last served on Board of Finance. So I appreciate the clarity and also just making sure folks at home and in the room know where we are on these items. All right, moving right along to item 4.2 on the deliberative agenda. Right up the chief.
He's the president of the Burlington Firefighter Association. And we are here to request the extension of fund utilization for the community response team pilot. The pilot was begun on the 16th of October, 2023. On the 14th of April, 2024, the 6 months is up. And we still have some monies available from the opioid settlement fund that was identified for this use. And we are requesting permission to continue using those dollars past the 14th of April. I've looked at the finances. It looks like it should get us through to about the 16th of June. But as former Councilor Sharon Busher stated, I am looking to get to the end of the fiscal year so we can come back and see you in June if we need to extend that. But I also want to thank everybody here and everybody online for their support for the community response team. We at the fire department have felt nothing but support from this body and the community, and we really appreciate it. So I do have some data I'd be happy to share. I know Milo likes my data, so if you'd like to see it, I'd be happy to show it.
I love data.
If you don't, then we can see it next week when I present this to the city council.
Thank you so much, Chief. And thank you, Lieutenant Blake, for being here as well. Are there any questions from the board? Councilor Carpenter.
Oh, just curious, the chief is saying you have settlement money till June 16th. You still got 2 more weeks left in this fiscal year. Would it not be prudent to amend this to fund them through June 30th and then we'll duke out next fiscal year? Get to that. It just seems odd that I want to support this. And is there a way to add 2 more weeks to it? Effectively is what I'm asking.
Yeah,
Rather than-
it would be about $10,000.
I mean, it seems awkward to have to come back and then not plan for it being fully funded through June 30. And then obviously there's the context of the next fiscal year.
Ask a question of you, say CIO, if I can. I was learning a little bit more about the opioid settlement funds and how they come into the city and the timing of such and all the different sources. So I am curious if how we would go about, I guess, earmarking that additional $10,000 to make sure we're getting to the end of the fiscal year based on past city practices with other ways we've been using the opioid settlement money when it does arrive.
I think part of the issue, Counselor Carpenter, was that we were trying to not have to ask for more money and just use up the time, because we are in, I guess what you could call kind of a cash flow situation now, where we know we have all of this money coming and we have, several different agreements. But we don't have all of that money. And so we gave this agreement, we gave an amount up to as much cash as we had, knowing that more money is coming in and, this is a pretty secure source. The money is coming in for many years. We could certainly make that motion. But I think we did not, when we first agreed on an amount, we didn't want to get too far ahead of our skis, so to speak.
And I can understand that. I don't know what is there a way to do it? Fund through June 30 contingent on getting
I think so.
more money, basically. And so we need to prove what's before us, and then we prove 2 more weeks contingent on receiving the money.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Councilor Kane?
So this is an estimate, right? The June 16th, based on trends, based on.
Correct. I have all of the costs to the program broken down weekly. It's in front of me right now. I just did the averaging. It averages about $4,437.11 a week is what the average is.
Does it take account a trend though?
Well, I'm just doing the averaging. Last October, we were a little higher because we were staffing up a little higher for a longer time because the days were longer. Over the winter, when the days were really short, we staffed it a little shorter so we wouldn't have people out in the dark for 4 or 5 hours. Now that the days are getting longer, I am starting to see those 12-hour days again. So that's why I averaged up a little bit for that 5,000.
Does your data that you might show us include trends with like incident response volume?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to see that.
Sure.
That's all right.
Chief, are you connected to them?
I am on and I'm ready to share.
Great.
I have access to do so. It says I'm disabled from screen sharing.
I'm gonna make you a co-host. Okay, you should be.
All right. All right, here comes Milo.
Yay.
All right, so let me just get to this here. There we go. So the first slide is just total call volume. It's a little hard to see with that little thing there, but that's okay.
Maybe minimize that.
I'll be good for something.
There, more than just a pretty face.
Yeah.
The first slide is just total call volume for the department so far this year. The orange line is just an average, but we are actually this year over last, we're 11% up already this year over last, based on from January 1 to April 7th. Call volume does go up considerably in the summer months, so that's when you start seeing that call volume go up. So the meat and potatoes of the CRT that we've always looked at is overdose totals in the city. And overdose totals in the city, what we look at is we look at the blue line up on the upper left, which is total overdose numbers. The orange line is overdoses that we transport, and the gray line is the overdoses that refuse transport, folks that get taken out of an overdose and then have no interest in seeking further medical care. That's one trend that we are concerned with, and that's why we are working to begin a buprenorphine in the street program through the CRT. And we're working with the hospital right now to create a protocol for Burlington to allow for us to start people on buprenorphine after we reverse their overdose, and which will allow them to feel less withdrawals and hopefully seek care at the hospital. And if not seek care, then we can work with them with some of that partnering agencies like the Turning Point Center, things like that. One of the average overdose numbers are down definitely this year, which I think is a very good trend. Again, this is since 2017. This is where it trends up. You can see in October of 2023, a pretty significant drop. The city has been working, definitely putting its best foot forward with this opioid crisis, and there's a lot of offerings to our folks, and the CRT is one of them. And since us tracking, we're seeing a pretty consistent drop and a pretty consistent staying drop, which is encouraging.
Can you go back to that?
Sure.
One thing to note, and I think this comes into play with Councillor Carpenter's question about continuing this and ensuring that we don't fall that 2-week period. If you look and see where our high points really are, we're coming into that now, where we're going to start hitting the June, July, the August. And so trying to ensure that there's consistency with this program, I think is important. One of the things that I know the membership is hopeful for is seeing that program out on the street during the June, July, and the August, where we had that huge spike. That's really where the city sort of only went crazy, where we were having 130 calls in a 48-hour period, which is just not sustainable. So trying to ensure that this truck is out there during the peak months is where we can really get that data to determine its impact and the connections that it's making, the services it's delivering. So I think that was just an important note.
Councilor Carpenter.
Since we're paying for this with opioid money do we have a sense of how long that might be? And where I'm going with my question to sort of respond to the last comment, and maybe we cannot do this tonight since it's not part of the general fund budget, which we will duke out in June. Is there a way actually for us to approve it through the summer, or some approve it now, or maybe next meeting through September or something like that, if we think we're getting that much opioid money, potentially even with the cash flow problem, do a contingency that we will commit to take this much of the opioid money through September.
I think there's some more, there's some deeper conversations to continuing it past July 1. This is staffed with overtime firefighters. We're staffing an average of 116 extra hours a week of this. So if you ever see my fire commissioner reports, I show you the overtime numbers, and the commitment of the firefighters to this has been incredible. And I'm concerned about, with regular overtime expenditures in the summer in needs, and then this 116 average hours on top of that, what that's going to do to folks as far as burnout. So I'd like to, if we feel that this is a sustainable program and something that we want to look into, I think it's just a deeper conversation as to how do we staff it and what is the true cost of that.
Are you going to be asking that for the FY25 budget?
I'm going to be having conversations with the new mayor about that, absolutely. And I figured I'd give her a couple of days before I hit.
We're on 1 week. Appreciate that.
And I'm just trying to sort of be
No,
helpful in the sense of, because I really appreciate that you need some guarantee of consistency, but whatever that may be. So
absolutely, and I don't have all the answers yet either, and I'm sure President Blake and I will talk a lot about it and have meetings with the mayor's office about it, and in the next month, I'd say that those are going to be conversations to have. Really, we're just looking to get approval to spend the rest of the monies that were already allocated, and I do appreciate the offering of the extra 2 weeks. That would be handy to not have to come back for that. If we can do that, I don't know if we can, and maybe Catherine and I could sit down and look at my budget and figure out if we can cover it within that somewhere. So.
I really appreciate that. And I also just want to name the fact that as we start looking towards fiscal year 25, and looking at all of our community safety piece, I would like to look at this a little more comprehensively to make sure we're making it sustainable for existing staff, being really smart about cross-department ways to really tackle this in fiscal year 25 with the clear intention that we need to make sure we're not pulling the rug out from folks, both the city staff who've been doing this critical and essential service, but the community itself, of course, too. We've built up a lot of trust, a lot of those relationships which are so vital in this work if we're really going to be a partner as a city with folks who are struggling with substance use disorder, and then all of our community partners as well. So yes, I'm very supportive of this 2-week extension, and for the budget coming up, I'm just hoping for a much more comprehensive understanding that we can work together, my administration and the council, to really make sure we have a fully comprehensive plan going forward as we look at also the BTV Cares program coming online, as well as some other components as well. Thank you, Councilor. Are there any other questions or discussion on this before I look to see if we're ready for a vote? Or anything else from the fire department?
Well, this is my favorite slide here.
Oh, right, your data, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine, it's fine. I skipped through some other ones, but this is the best one, I think. This shows total overdose numbers in 2022 and 2023, left to right. And then in the third column, the fourth column, you see percentage in red and percentage decreases in green. And you can see the months leading up to January through September, there was pretty significant increases in overdoses from that month the year before. We began the program in October, and you were seeing consistent decreases since. So from the month the year before. So I find that to be a very interesting slide. I do know that, and this is anecdotal for me because I don't have any real data on this. I do know that there have been some police action, whether it's local or state or federal, with some of the drug influxes into the area. I've just heard that. I haven't seen any data on it, but I'm sure that has something to do with it as well. I can just speak to what we're doing and the data that we've collected since. And then you can see the 25 weeks before and the 25 weeks after. You can see the increase 22 to 23 on the left, and then 25 weeks after the decrease from 23 to 24. So pretty interesting there. And then on the bottom, that's how many folks we've seen. My EMS chief sends me she goes through all of the reports every week, and she sends me a report on Monday morning, and it tells me how many attendees, which means how many folks we've touched, wound care items we've handed out. We do comfort care supplies now, like Kleenex and hand warmers, Narcan leave behind kits, that's what NLB stands for, and then referrals to bridge services or other service providers, how many requests we've received via the phone, things like that. So you can see the numbers there. So that's kind of the true impact of the program, is right there. So that's my last slide.
Councilor Carpenter.
I'm not trying to be cheap, offline to get more, but is any of that covered by Medicaid?
It's if we transport it, we get paid. If we don't transport, we don't. So that's just the way EMS is built, basically. If we go to those overdoses and we transport to the hospital, we do bill insurance companies. Yeah.
So I'm just.
But how I guess I could break that down to say this is for the CRT, but it's just medical, and it comes in as and medical and EMS is our most significant revenue for the general fund portion of our budget. So that's the general fund, like reduction of our budget comes off of EMS transport revenue.
I'd like to learn more, just because it might be a conversation for another day, even like.
State conversation about
It's
changing the billing
Yes, I mean,
components for like lift assist,
Yeah.
non-transports,
Mhm.
those
So
type of things.
there are, and we are having conversations with we're doing a study right now on revenue in the city. I just met with them last week about that. And we can get into that here if you want to, but I'd be happy to talk to you
yeah,
about
and I'm just
my.
curious from my old service days, and
Yeah.
it seems like because the department is doing so much, right? It is a state issue, it's not a Burlington issue, I understand that.
Agreed, but I do struggle with going to help somebody off the floor and then sending them a bill for $500.
Well, except the state would pay half of it, and maybe that would be.
And that's something I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We're doing a whole revenue study right now, and I'm that is certainly not off the table. I actually asked them to kind of look at that and speak with our billing agent, called a company called ECP.
Yeah.
To talk about that. I asked Galen at ECP, look into non-transport. What does that look like if we bill for non-transports, things like that. So we are looking into it. I'm just, I'm also looking at it in kind of the human aspect of.
Well, and it may be beyond what we're gonna do this minute, but if we're looking for additional revenue sources and we are providing them and they might be Medicaid eligible in another setting, you know, that's money off of our table, so.
And that is 100% being looked at through this revenue study.
Okay,
And
Absolutely.
Councilor Carpenter, I'll also just add that the legislature is also wrapping up some increased reimbursements. It's making its way through the very slow process. And of course, we have about 6 weeks left of that process. So I would imagine that in May, as we all roll up our sleeves for fiscal year 25, we can start to really look at other additional ways we can look at revenue.
and I think, we'll see what happens, but it's a conversation I hope that doesn't end, because I think, again, a more aggressive, I'm just gonna call it bill back to the state of some variety, because we've had so many services laid on us. I hope continues into next year, and I see it not just with the overdose prevention, but services in-house and longer conversation.
Yep.
And we do have if I could speak to this, we do have a bill H747 in the House right now that we authored with the legislator that is looking for some monies to the Burlington Fire Department for the opioid crisis. It has support, but it doesn't have broad support, I don't think, out of Chittenden County. So, which is what it is, but we are, as a department and as a city, looking for ways of funding this outside of the general fund, for sure.
Thank you.
So we will have, or you will have on your council agenda in about a week, a legislative update. And I do think this is worthy of a topic in a future Board of Finance as we really start to look at creatively where we can pull down funds from the state, knowing that Burlington is holding a lot of the suffering, frankly, of the state. And we should be smart around use of funds and partnering with the state and leveraging so that bills like that can actually get moved and that we can, again, partner more. That is the work ahead. So.
And I do feel like, however folks feel about Burlington, a strong Burlington is good for the state. It is. So.
I agree.
Yeah.
We are going to say that loud and clearly as we go forward. Okay, so for the sake of time, is there any further discussion on this item in front of us? Or we see if there is a motion. Question. I think we're ready. And Councilor Carpenter, I'm going to ask if you would be willing to make the motion perhaps with your amendment that you had in mind?
Yes, I
If
would.
you're willing. And I would love the practice of reading the actual full motion for the sake of clarity.
I would move to approve and recommend that the city council. What number is
I say the Board of Finance, if you're reading on the.
4.2. Move and recommend that, well, that's a recommended action that we recommended to the city council. So I think.
Yep.
So finance committee approving it, right? I have
Yes,
these
it's
motions.
Board of Finance approve and then recommend to the
Okay.
city council. It is a bit confusing the way it's worded.
We'll get better.
Yeah. I would move that the Board of Finance approve and recommend that the city council authorize chief administrative officer to make any and all necessary budget amendments, allocate the use of the assigned opioid money fund to support operating costs of the fire department community response team. And where do I put this amendment? Is it best to do it at the end, or do I want to put it in here? Until the funds are exhausted with a budget not to exceed the original approval of 182,598, and to further authorize the extension through the end of the fiscal year 25, or available funding with, Catherine, if you could give me some words here, with $10,000 expenditure contingent on receipt from the opioid settlement fund, something like that.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. So the motion is as drafted on our agenda and also on the memo. Just quick clarification, fiscal year 24, you said 25 just by an error, which is
24, excuse me.
Yep. And just to clarify at the end, just make sure everyone knows the intent to extend the program to the end of the fiscal year with an estimated $10,000 contingent on use of opioid settlement funds.
Yes.
Is that the motion, Councilor? Thank you very much for legislating on the fly. Is there a second to Councilor Carpenter's motion? Seconded by Councilor Kane. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Chief and Lieutenant, for being here. Honor be
Excuse me?
Councilor Grant, we're about to move on to the next item.
Yes, I just have something really quick. Because of the way the camera is situated, it doesn't move. So we can hear the mayor, but those of us who are watching online cannot see the mayor. So, and also so either the camera gets adjusted or everybody kind of slide down one seat.
There I am.
Hi, thank you. Sorry for the interruption. I was
That's
just
okay, Councilor. I appreciate that and the spirit of making sure folks got things here. Okay. And a great cue to get our next item up at the table. Great. So moving along here. All right, moving on to item 4.3, the Burlington Electric Department memo of understanding for the CityPlace public improvements with the Department of Public Works.
So I am Senior Public Works Engineer Laura Wheelock, and with me is Julia Ersaki, Public Works Engineer. We are working on the CityPlace project. So this is an item that is in support of a TIF funding, tax increment financing around the CityPlace project. So this is BED's contract with DPW so that they can install and purchase the new lighting that'll go around the project. So with this being TIF funding, it is fairly specific to this location. It is part of the overall budget that was previously brought to the council. I think it was fall of last year. It is a modest request, but I do want to bring up the fact we had a few questions about the BED lighting policy. So BED's lighting policy for Director Pine was established about 25 years ago in the sense that BED brought forward to their Public Utility Commission and the Utility Board a question about can they pay for the improved cost of the decorative lighting? And for a conversation with Director Pine, the ultimate finding of the Utility Board was no. BED could not incur and bring to their ratepayers the increased cost of the capital from standard lighting to decorative lighting. They can maintain it. They can help install it, but they cannot incur that first initial cost. And so for the last 25 years, this has been the practice as we've improved lighting around the city, from North Street, Main Street, St. Paul Street, Riverside Ave, and now bringing to Cherry and Bank Streets improved decorative lighting. So with a specific request, Julia is going to go through how our math works. Sure. So we worked with BED for them to give us their kind of standard estimate for standard lighting, which is basically a fiberglass pole with the Cobra head light style, which was about $109,000. Their estimate for the decorative street lighting, which is kind of the black, little more like historic looking, light and a bit more evenly distributed light was around $420,000. So the difference between those two numbers is what the city is responsible for, which is $311,230. That we're going to enter into an MOU with one of our fellow city departments, but because they are controlled by the Public Utility Board, it is necessary for them to be very transparent about their transactions of city money going between different departments. So this is why we do have an MOU with them. TIF also appreciates it.
Julia and Laura, thank you. Are there questions from the board? Councilor
Just
Carpenter?
one, and not top of anybody's list, but since they gave me that opinion 25 years ago, is it worth asking again? I mean, I would think a lot of small downtowns have moved more in that way, and we have things like downtown tax credits, and so it's not just a small ask on somebody's list to say.
It can be. I think in this exercise, we've looked at that could be something we ask of BED to bring back as a double check. In this case specifically, it is TIF funding, and it is really very specific to developing the public improvements. So I don't know that it would change our direction or our request tonight as to how this gets funded. But it certainly, if we were using more direct city funds to do something like this, that is a worthwhile.
And I think as we do more, well, all towns do more renovations to their downtowns.
Any other questions? Discussion?
I'd move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the director of public works to execute a memorandum of understanding with the Burlington Electric Department in the amount of $311,237 for construction of street lighting associated with the CityPlace Public Improvements Project, subject to the review and approval of the city attorney's office.
Thank you for the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Any further discussion? Councilor Travis.
I guess my question, and maybe it's a dumb question, but just wondering, I mean, can you speak a little bit more to sort of why the city has made the decision to go in the direction of the more decorative lighting as opposed to the standard lighting? And I mean, I think as we look towards, budget shortfall in FY25, are there any discussions about whether or not, in terms of decorative elements versus standard elements, we're having to revisit that as well?
So the decorative lighting that's been selected for this project was vetted under the Great Streets process. It is an initial capital investment, and then after that, the repair and maintenance of everything related to the lights becomes part of BED's expenses, which certainly carry back to the ratepayers, but it is not something that the city incurs on the capital side. The choice of the lighting is important to the users on the street. BED actually, I apologize, I am not a lighting engineer, but I am speaking to what I heard them share. The lighting on the street is lit to something called IES standards. It's Illuminating Engineering Society. Thank you, Julia. And really it's based on a pedestrian scale. And so they put lights out on the streets to meet the amount of pedestrians that will encounter the amount of traffic on the street. So you can have highways that need no streets if there's no pedestrians, but as soon as you add a pedestrian to the street, you need lighting. Or pedestrian accommodation. So really this lighting is to take the existing streetlights that are out there, which are LED, they're downlit, they meet a lot of our standards, but they create what's called hotspots in their light pattern. And so pedestrians have to enter in and out of these hotspots, and it's not kind of an encompassing experience. So it feels different. This lighting is lower and a little bit more frequent and a little less bright so that you can have a continuous lighting experience as a pedestrian.
Makes sense. Just one other question. Sorry to put you on the spot because I know you're not a lighting engineer, but I expected the cost of the lighting itself would be higher. One of the things I was interested in is how much more labor goes into installing the decorative lights. I mean, there's hundreds more hours that BED is apparently having to spend on the decorative lighting, including much more engineering and inspector work. I mean, in the grand scope of things, it's not a huge sum of money, but just curious if is it because there's more lights, or do you have any idea as to why BED is having to spend so much more time installing decorative lighting as opposed to standard lighting?
These decorative lights, it's my understanding, are not all that much more complicated than the decorative lights that exist already in the downtown. And I think that that's important to recognize, is that decorative lighting already exists, and therefore if they ever replace it, they have to replace it with the same decorative fixture. So decorative credit is a little bit misleading. They do that because that's what their utility board has allowed them to do. But if they were to take the existing decorative lights and have to disassemble and reassemble them, their decorative cost and labor would be similar to what we're proposing to put on the street. The fixture types, the arms, the poles and whatnot, it's not all that different, decorative to decorative is what they've shared. Other than there are a few extras because we are going to a lower scale lighting. So there are typically 5 lights per block versus the 4 to 3 that there can be now.
Any further discussions?
I'm sure they will to come speak.
Yeah, no, thanks for better or worse. These are questions that we're going to have to be more exacting on in the months to come.
I appreciate that point. Further discussions, Councilor Kane?
Thanks. On a similar note, I see in the spreadsheet here, there's like contingency 15%, and then there's like an added 12% for like general admin. So that's about a quarter of money in the project that isn't like specifically allocated to out of the 400,000 to, I guess, materials or labor. So that could be part of our discussion in terms of like how we allocate funds towards projects moving forward, given the budget shortfall. Not experienced with thinking about capital outlays and how contingency needs to be allocated for, but maybe just given the budget situation, we should, talk at some point relatively soon about, making sure that capital outlay methodology is as careful as it can be fiscally.
Thank you, Councilor Kane. And I think that's another good pin, if we can put in that, and as we start building and working towards as a new board here, into planning for fiscal year 25. That, and we talked about before, just themes that we need to pick up as we continue going forward. I am mindful of time, so I just want to see if there's any other pressing.
Concur, but this is a tough one, so.
Yeah.
So question on the floor to approve this Board of Finance item. It's related to an MOU between Public Works and BED. And with the question, we have a first and a second. Are we ready to vote? Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Julia and Laura. Thank you. Moving right along. Item 4.4, the Champlain Parkway, City of Burlington, and Champlain Water District MOA, Department of Public Works.
Ian Drummond, Norm Baldwin, City Engineer, also Division Director of Technical Services. So what you have in front of you is asking or requesting your support for authorization for the director to execute this MOA. I think it's an important element to this conversation is to understand that this MOA is associated with the initial contract for the Champlain Parkway. Champlain Parkway initial contract, as most know, is from Home Avenue North to Kilmer Street. The final phase of construction is yet to be put out to bid and considered by the council. So this is relevant to this first initial contract. This is a bike path segment that is in the south end near the 189 interchange. There just coincidentally and unfortunately, we have 2 easements that exist in that same space where we're referencing, and that is the CWD easement and the city's easement. CWD has a 24-inch transmission line, water transmission line that is coincidental to our easement. And given that they have an easement that precedes our easement, they have first priority. As a result, there's been a lot of ongoing discussion with CWD in terms of their comfort with our development of our shared use path over their 24-inch transmission line, which is critical to their system. and the broader Chittenden County community. So they have been cooperative to within reason. Their goal was to make sure that a few things. One, that we have an understanding in terms of how they would be responsible or not responsible for maintaining the shared use path if their system needs repair or fix. And they placed that responsibility on us for reasons because of this priority. They have asked us to do some significant redesign related to how much cover would go over that water line because they don't want to have it too shallow or too deep. Too deep means they have to have. Too shallow, it means it could freeze and then cause problems. So we've worked this out. This MOA is kind of an extension of the understanding of these easements, but I think it protects both their interests and ours. And as a result, we've come to a final conclusion where we think we can agree. And as you see in the packet, there was the MOA has been executed by the general manager of CWD and now is relying on our execution of that. So this would, hopefully if the Board of Finance supports this, and Board of Finance would provide that support and then move it up to the council on the 15th.
Norm?
I don't know if there's any other questions.
Well, let's see. Are there any questions from the board? Councilor Burrow?
Yes, I'm just trying to understand. I looked at the information in the packet. So basically the bottom line is if they have to fix their water line, we have to then come back and fix whatever disruption to the shared use path materials.
Yeah, so they would set finished grade back to where it was. And we would have a shared use path that needed to have basically refinished grade and repave the bike path itself and potentially replace any of our landscaping. One of the things they asked for in our landscape is not to have deep rooted trees that would impact their facility. As a result, you'll see in the drawings, there's lilacs and bushes and vegetation that is sheltering South Meadow, but is not in any way going to impact their facility.
So does this line, and I couldn't tell this from the drawings, does it run parallel to, or does it intersect the path?
So it's coincidental for about 150, 200 feet.
Okay.
And as you move further west, CWD's water line breaks south. So unfortunately or fortunately, I gave you a high level of detail that you would have to kind of go through the design and see where kind of water line as you go down the cross sections, where the water line is either directly underneath it or moving away from our shared use path.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't think we have really, I mean, it seems like the way the easements chronologically happen, it seems like this is we don't really have an option.
We don't. So not from
we want to have a shared use path. This is necessary.
This is what's necessary to satisfy CWD to allow that.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
So on that note, is there any more discussion or questions?
Thanks. One question, I'm looking at the memo and noticed that there's a point that talks about subject to the attorney's review and approval.
Yep.
But that's not in the motion. So I just didn't know if this is already, if this is the final, or if we need to add that to the motion that's subject to.
This is the final, and in my memo, the timing of this, unfortunately, there was back and forth with our private attorney, Eric, our attorney, and CWD's attorney, and they finalized the last minute before the packet was released with my memo. So this is the final document that we're referencing.
I think.
Yep.
So to clarify, do we need to change the motion language in order to?
No, it sounds like it's already been finalized.
Yes.
Great, just making sure, crossing our T, dotting our i's, okay. Any further discussion or questions? Board? If not, I will entertain a motion. And Councilor Carpenter, do you mind reading? Sorry, I'm gonna ask this just for record keeping here. Item 4.4.
Just a comment, but it's, the meat of the stuff is in one side, but the motions are on another side of when you go to the agenda on Civic Clerk. So I always like to follow where the memos are, but that doesn't have the motion. So that's just why.
We'll work on some templates, make sure everything is seamless.
Well, this would be, for me personally, it would be easier to have the motion included when you go with that. I just,
I have this copy if you need.
well, I know, now I find it out.
Okay, thank you.
This is a 4.4, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah. I move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the Department of Public Works to execute a memorandum of understanding. Oops, that's the wrong one. Authorize the Director of Public Works or his designee to execute a memorandum of understanding of agreement with the Champlain Water District for the purposes of delineating the parties' respective rights and obligations with respect to CWD's existing easement that was reported in the City of Burlington Land Records, March 1984, and the city's easement originally executed on November 7, 1988.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Councilor Kane. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you all.
Thank you, Norm. Moving right along, item 4.5, Colchester Riverside Barrett Mill intersection and finance and maintenance agreement acceptance. Burlington STP 5009 DPW. Hello, Chapin. Welcome.
Hello,
Can you
great.
see everyone?
Yes,
Again, please?
yes. Chapin Spencer, Director of Public Works. I have with me Senior Public Works Engineer Laura Wheelock, Public Works Engineer Maddie Slender. So thank you for bearing with Team DPW with these 6 deliberative items. It's a sign of all the work we have underway. This generational piece project here in front of you is connected to the next agenda item as well. This is the Colchester Barrett Riverside Mill intersection finance and maintenance agreement. And this, along with the Winooski Bridge finance and maintenance agreement, really unlocks, after decades of work on the city side, to advance a comprehensive overhaul of this infrastructure. This finance and maintenance agreement allows us to harness federal and state funding to accomplish a project that without that funding, we would not have the capability to complete. So I'm really excited to have staff here go through the details of this. We did hear from former Councilor Busher tonight in public forum. We would be happy to go to the Ward 1 NPA and discuss this project as we have in the past with them as we move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over.
So to focus on the intersection and this agreement that we're asking for you guys to consider. So it's important to take one quick step back. V-Trans brings municipalities under agreements in 2 different ways. One is this finance and maintenance agreement, and one is something called a cooperative agreement, in case you hear other ones brought forward to you in your time here. The finance and maintenance agreement is actually V-Trans asserting itself that they're going to be the leaders on this project, that they are asking for our permission to be able to have the authority to do work within the public right of way. Other than that, really, it is a standard document. At the end of all cooperative agreements, we actually do usually sign finance and maintenance agreements, which is our agreement about how we will maintain the federalized improvement and those dollars put in our right of way. These agreements still allow us to incur costs and bill them back to the grant, as well as for any consultants that we need as city supporting staff to be able to move these projects forward. What this agreement does not do is lock us into an exact concept. The city council did support the concept of a 4-way signalized intersection, which is part of the 2019 scoping study, as well as another affirmation that went through the Tucson Council last May. So the concept alternative has been selected through that process. This essentially allows us to continue to refine the details within it. How is lighting going to be situated? How is stormwater going to be situated? How will the city's utilities, water, sewer, storm, and electric, all be accommodated? Because those are all eligible for federal funding. So improvements to those assets are part of this project, as well as the components of the roadway improvement, and the new bike ped facilities that come under this project. So that is the shortest that I can give about the intersection. So I'll take questions.
Any questions for CPW? Really? Okay. Oh,
I was gonna move.
I love that. Go for it.
Okay, it's a two-part motion. First, I move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the Director of Public Works to execute the FM 0477 standard finance and maintenance agreement for federal aid projects, Burlington STP 5000, parenthetically 29, from the Vermont Agency of Transportation for designing construction of Colchester, Riverside, Barrett, Mill intersection with a V-Trans commitment to cover 100% of eligible project costs. And two, to approve and recommend that the city council authorize that the chief administrative officer, their designee, to effect all necessary budget amendments and transfers of funds to and from the above referenced funding sources as needed to pay the above referenced project expenses in FY 24 and overall project budgets as further defined in attachment 2.
Thank you very much, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Kane. Any further discussion? Councilor Travis?
Just first of all, I think we're about to turn to the bridge as well here. And I think I reached out to see if this could be on the deliberative agenda for our next council meeting. And I think it would probably make sense just to confirm that both these items be on deliberative together, if that makes sense from your all's perspective. And I do think it's because, as you all know, there's been significant public feedback on this project in particular, and walk and bike infrastructure. And whereas, my understanding is that we're not necessarily with this action locking ourselves into a particular design, I do think that A, will be important for the public to understand that fact as you reiterated here. But B, I think for the new council, it will be an important opportunity for them to learn about this generational project. So I don't have many questions right now, other than to say that that I anticipate there will be more questions on Monday.
We are prepared.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. Councilor Grant?
Hi, quick question. So, at a previous council meeting, the design was reviewed and there was a lot of feedback from the public and a few of the counselors with regards to the bridge design. Is this design, it was kind of like it was brought to the public after the design was finalized, but there was some question about that. Is this design finalized, and is there no consideration about the walk, bike ability and adjusting the number of lanes?
So the bridge is our next item, but I'm happy to answer now or later.
I was just gonna make that point. So Councilor Grant, I think we're gonna hold that question until we're on that agenda item, please.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Councilor Carpenter?
And I believe you said, but you could re-clarify. If I'm wrong, I am reading these actions, or at least this current action, and actually, I'm reading the second action to authorize expenditure of money, no matter what the design is. I mean, is that? So these whether it's 6 lanes or 1 lane, we still have to have these maintenance agreements. Am I accurate with that?
Yes.
Or no matter what the intersection looks like, we still have to have the maintenance agreement, because we are basically asking the state and the feds to pay for it effectively, no matter what we design, which will come at a later point.
Correct.
Correct.
City council still needs to authorize the final concept.
So
Yes.
by agreeing to these, we're only agreeing to letting the state and feds pay for it.
And to continue the design process that will give you all the additional answers that you seek.
Okay.
And so this is not binding us into a particular design, and will enable us to have that conversation more fully at the council on Monday.
And stepping back a minute, since whatever, 2019, we have committed to fixing that intersection and that bridge. And proceeding with it. So this is just part of saying we agree to fix the intersection and we agree to fix the bridge. Or participate in having it fixed. So
within the general terms
Yeah.
outlined in the finance and maintenance agreement. And we fully understand that we've had very productive conversations with our state and other partners, the city of Winooski and the bike ped advocates as well. And, you know, we aren't done yet, but we have cooperative discussions in progress that I am very confident is going to land us in a better place than we showed you originally.
just it's a long time, but is Winooski having these same discussions? I mean, it's sort of a parallel
Yes.
process. So they're approving something.
Winooski is not a partner on the intersection,
Well,
which is the
yes,
one
of course, yeah.
in front of us, but they are bringing forward to their city council, I believe, next Monday as well, their finance and maintenance agreement for the bridge.
Okay, so back to that with the intersections. I know we're commingled with them. So let's, I believe I've already lost track. We had a motion on the intersection. So on that question, is there any further discussion or questions about the intersection? I see none. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those nay. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Now moving on to the bridge, item 4.6 is the Burlington Winooski Bridge Finance and Maintenance Agreement Acceptance. Not gonna read the rest of that. We're on to the bridge. Anything further from our presenters on the bridge agreement?
Yes, this one is a little bit different. So the cities, both Burlington and Winooski, state of Vermont, and with help with the CCRPC, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, applied for a RAISE grant in April of 2002. RAISE grant, I don't remember the acronym for that. I'm sorry, 2022.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. I know these things take a long time.
Yep, they might. We applied for RAISE grant funding, which is a replacement of various different federal programs, but it's for larger scale projects, $5 million to $25 million projects. So we applied jointly. We were successful with our award, and the Agency of Transportation graciously agreed to continue that funding. So the total cost of the bridge is somewhere between $60 and $73 million under its current estimate for replacement. The RAISE grant secured about 25 million of that with our local match. RAISE grant is an 80-20, so 80% federal, 20% other funded to be able to make the local match. That portion is made up of V-Trans saying that they will agree to participate in this cost using state money, state tax money, to be able to put in 10%, and then asking that the remaining 10% be split between the two communities because we own this bridge 50-50 with the city of Winooski. So Burlington's share of the RAISE grant and all of the funding for the project is 5%. So V-Trans, having access to other structures, which is bridges replacement funding, said that they will cover that gap between the 25 to the 60 or $73 million with state bridge replacement money, keeping the same splits that our RAISE grant had. So that is very advantageous to the city of Burlington and city of Winooski, who own this at 50%. If they chose to not participate, we could be on the hook for a lot more than just 5% of the total cost. But that is the difference of this agreement versus the one you just heard about. This one, the city is on, is being asked for 5% of participating costs, in addition to whatever non-participating costs that we have. The non-participating costs are specific just to the city of Burlington. We do not bring that into the split. So Winooski will pay for their non-participating costs. Just contaminated soils is usually what we're finding. Burlington will pay for our contaminated soil costs for whatever's found on our side. To speak to where we are with our public process, because I do think it's important and it has been asked. So since we were at the council in January of this year, we've had probably a half a dozen meetings with bike walk orientated groups within the city of Burlington, as well as the city of Winooski. Our last meeting that we had in March, we proposed an alternative configuration to the bridge cross section, widening the downstream side, which is the western side, from 12 feet to 15 feet to allow for dedicated bidirectional bike facilities and a 6-foot pedestrian space. 5 foot pedestrian space, sorry. So 5, 5, and 5. This was a fairly well-received compromise with the advocacy groups, which included Local Motion, members of our Walk Bike Council, members from Winooski's. Thank you, Maddie. Pedestrian Advocacy. They call, I can't remember their acronym.
It's their bike pedestrian.
Yes, it has an interesting one, and I can't remember it. As well as the AARP. We're all at this last meeting in March, where we did come to conclusion at the end of the meeting with the agreements upon pursuing that cross section. That comes with a caveat. That is a cross section that was not checked during the scoping study. It does widen the bridge by at least a foot. And so we're not quite ready to bring that forward publicly until some more due diligence is done to ensure that that can still be accommodated in the very limited space. There's a direction that VTrans, the city of Winooski, and the city of Burlington all agreed to pursue as the final concept, assuming it can fit. So that's where we are with our compromises on our improvements to the bike ped allocation. The vehicle lanes of the bridge still stay the same. It's still the same allocation of 4 lanes. The width of those lanes is not able to be determined until about 2 years from now when we get our proposals from our contractors, being a design build project. But that does still require city council authorization, so that decision will not be made without city council.
Thank you, Laura. Any questions or discussion from the board? Is anyone ready to make a motion? I know these are long motions, but I do appreciate it. So, and we'll come with printed copies for everyone so that you can read easily next time.
Complex.
Okay, these are, we want to make sure it gets right. Counselor, was that a hand? Counselor?
It is a hand.
All right, go for it, please.
I will move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the director of public works to execute the M0449 standard finance and maintenance agreement for federal aid projects, Burlington, Winooski, BF Raise 2, from the Vermont Agency of Transportation for design and construction of the Winooski Bridge, and the funding split for this project being 80% federal, 10% state, 5% Burlington, and 5% Winooski. And I also move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the chief administrative officer or their designee all necessary budget amendments for transfers of funds to and from the above referenced funding sources as needed to pay the above referenced project expenses in FY24 and overall project budgets as further detailed in attachment 2.
That is the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Carpenter. Any further discussion? That's okay.
Maybe just explain, so 5 feet for the 2 bike lanes and then 5 feet for pedestrians, and is that separated space between the pedestrians and the cyclists and between each side for biking as well, or like in terms of?
It would be, it's still a flat cross section. It would be 15 feet allocated with striping and designation that way. It is not a protected bike space, a protected pedestrian space separate from each other.
Has that been considered? Right.
It has very much been considered and reviewed with these different advocacy groups through several different meetings, and ultimately they did conclude and agree with the shared space, but designated with markings to start.
Is the vehicular space separate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any further comments before we move on to votes? Moving to the question. John, body language over there. Councilor Kane, you have another thought?
Maybe, yeah, so it's been considered just like making the pedestrian part a little bit higher. I mean, I imagine that wouldn't add that much in construction cost, just to like separate grade to help people. I mean, Americans don't, Americans do a terrible job of like staying in pedestrian versus bike lanes, and like just making it safe for both groups would be, I think, important.
Vermonters do not do well staying in their lane. However, we did have some national experts come in and they studied bridges from a lot of different communities in these pedestrian spaces. And it's almost the fact that we don't have enough people using these spaces to want to encourage people to stay in their lane. We did I think that last meeting, so that bit that comes from that consultant we can make available. I think it's really enlightening information. It's information being a native Vermonter I didn't have. But really they were finding that if there is the volumes there, people will stay in their lanes. If there's not the volumes there, then having this flexible space is really helpful. Raising it up is challenging, that it creates an edge that's going to have people drop off. It's incredibly hard to maintain, and ultimately for our sidewalk tractors that fall off these curbs, because it is a narrow space, we risk overturning the sidewalk tractors, which has happened.
Thanks. One other question, is the pedestrian space going to be on the river side? Because I guess that would be important, because you don't want the pedestrians looking over the edge in the bike lane. Yeah,
that is how we had sketched it. I do think that's how we'll find that we want to configure.
Yeah.
These design ideas are all tentative at this point, and part of the challenge is working with Winooski to understand their future build out of their network, as their network is not as developed as ours at this point.
So we have a motion on the floor, and also just a reminder, the council will have more discussion, not only soon, but also later, as we continue to do this build design. That's not the right term, but build design process going forward. So more time to dive into the details. So I appreciate this. All right. So the question on the floor is to accept the Burlington-Winooski Bridge Finance and Maintenance Agreement. I'm going to call the question. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Patty, Laura, and Jacob. Jacob's just going to stay in his seat.
I will stay in my
Keep
seat.
going. All right, item
Good with that.
4.7 is our next item. This is the authorization to execute a contract with Hallam, thank you, ICS for supervisory control and data acquisition, SCADA system upgrade at the water plant, DPW, and water resources. Thank you, JP. You want to introduce folks who are at the table?
Great. I have Division Director Megan Moyer, and I also have our Risk and Resiliency Engineer, Steve Wright, with us, and they're going to kick it off.
Just gonna say a couple things. So Steve's been with us for, I don't remember how many years now, in water resources forever. And one of the really important things that the council supported, was 2 years ago, when we knew that Steve was going to be approaching retirement, was to create a succession position for him and put him in an effective closet and have him focus all of his efforts and energies on building resiliency at our only water plant. And really excited to be bringing.
Recording in progress.
Before it's time to replace it. So we've done a number of upgrades over the years. And one of the last things that we're trying to do here, we did a full upgrade in 2010, which is 14 years ago. And before that, hardware and software starts to fail, we figured it's time to migrate to a new system. In 2020, probably none of you, but some previous councilors have approved the start of an upgrade to the two PLCs, the brains of the control system that we use. And what we're trying to do now is move on to and complete the rest of the pieces of the puzzle. And so what you have in front of you, we did a little history to give you a background of the whole PLC and the SCADA system. We knew, given the dollar figure, and we wanted to ensure to you and to the public that we had the best possible company or companies to do this work for us. We put out a request for qualifications. It was publicly advertised on the city website. We got 2 proposals back, one from Hallam ICS, which is a local company in South Burlington. They've been doing work for us for 25 years. And we also got a proposal from another company out of Mesa, Arizona. We reviewed the proposals. We had a scoring system, and Hallam ICS scored very well. And it went far better than the company out of Arizona, which really doesn't know our equipment, know our hardware, know our software, that sort of stuff. We worked with Hallam to get 2 phases, like phase A and phase B, put together for a final replacement of our hardware and software. And what we're proposing to do is to move ahead. We've got the total dollar figure, right, for both the phases. And we want to do phase A in this fiscal year. We have the funds for it, and then do the rest of it next fiscal year. As funds allow. Megan can talk about that.
And all of our contracts do have non-appropriation clauses, so for some reason, if we were to have funds approved for FY 25, we'd be allowed to pause on that portion of the contract, but for efficiency, we are asking you to approve the full contract at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
Motion.
Oh, motion. I love that. All right, motion.
That's all right. Yeah. To approve and recommend that the city council authorize the director of the Department of Public Works to award a contract to Hallam ICS for up to $110,000. Complete the SCADA upgrade scope at the water plant, subject to the final review and approval of the city's attorney's office.
Councilor Kane, is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Barlow. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving right along.
So the next item, Steve's also been working on, I forget what we're calling the list, all the different ways that things could go wrong, which is a very scary list that we review. And one of the things that came up is going to be addressed by the next item, which hopefully we get points for having pictures in this memo. Like the word vintage show. That's Steve.
Steve, well done. Vintage, probably not all.
So, one of the jobs, one of the directives of my new position here is to identify and try to eliminate single point failure. And as Megan said earlier, we've only got one water treatment plant. We have a number of finished pumps that pump the water out into 110 miles of distribution pipes so that you all have clean, safe drinking water at all of your homes. But there is a situation where all the pumps are in one particular building. And so if there was a problem, fire or something like that, right, then we wouldn't be able to pump and you wouldn't have any water. And so we have some older pumps that were put in the mid 80s in the treatment plant itself, not in the pump building next door. They haven't been used since the early 90s because we didn't need them. And now we're like, we think we want them. We want to reuse them. So we pulled one of them out. We evaluated it. It's worth rebuilding as opposed to replacing it with a brand new pump. It's a fraction of the cost of a new pump and motor. And what we're trying to do here is we went out, we had one of them evaluated by a local company, said, yeah, it's worth rehabbing it. We agreed with that. Given the dollar figure, we couldn't just give the job to the company, this local company. So we went out to bid and we received 3 quotes. The low bidder responsive bidder ended up being a company called Corrosion Products and Equipment out of Massachusetts, Springfield, I believe. And we checked them out and they had client references. They've done pumps. These are big pumps, 350 horsepower, 4160.
It was a very exciting day with cranes and.
Yeah, the pictures, two of these pictures are from Megan's office window, actually. Thank you for pointing them. But this company has got a lot of experience doing pumps of this size. So we have complete faith in that. And we're certainly asking you to agree to help for us to go ahead and rebuild them. There's 3 of them. Again, because of the time size of the project, we're proposing to do one of them now this fiscal year, and then the other 2 next fiscal year as funds permit.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions from the board? Councilor Barlow.
Thank you. I had a question about, are F5 to 7, are they the same as F1 to 4? They're just.
No, they're all different. We have different size pumps depending on the demand. So F1 and F2 and F3, F1 and F3 are 500 horsepower, F2 is 400, F4 is 350. And then these 3 pumps are all the same size. But we try to change, we over the time, put in different size pumps. So you run, in the wintertime, the demand is down, you use a smaller pump.
And you've also put in,
Variable frequency drives that provide speed control and save energy.
So my question, I guess, was that's helpful, but my question is why have these pumps not been run since, what was it, 1993 or something? And why wouldn't we just as
because I was in charge.
part of a regular rotation?
Very good question. So excellent question. So many years ago, the EPA required that all the treatment plants have enough what's called disinfection contact time in order to have your disinfectant, in our case chlorine, enough time for it to inactivate not only the bacteria and viruses that might have made it through the plant, but also the protozoans like Giardia and Cryptosporidium. And so one of the things that we did is the clear well that these pumps are in, we connected it to a different clear well and we baffled them all to meet our contact time. So that kind of precluded needing these. These are not going to probably be used day in and day out. It's going to because of the whole contact time. But we plan they're going to be used in times when we need to take a clear well down in order to inspect it, clean it, do any kind of repairs to it.
So you do anticipate using them now?
We will be exercising them.
We will be, yes, yeah.
We will absolutely be exercising them.
Yeah, you don't sit and wait, for years and hope when you push the button then it's gonna go because
And we've been doing more of that under Steve's guidance with all of the equipment and making sure that we're exercising things regularly and, capturing if something's wrong with the pump before we actually need it. Lots and lots of work is being put into making this place better and making sure we're using all of our parts and pieces.
Councilor Champlain, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it's important to note, a quick conversation about the clear well. There are parts of the plant that these pumps will benefit our ability to continue cleaning and improving parts of the plant that are in the essential train now, but with these pumps give us more flexibility. So this plant hasn't received a capital upgrade in 40 years. That is beyond its normal reinvestment time. So really this work is to get additional time out of it so that we have enough time to plan for the generational upgrade that will be coming.
And we did reference that in the, we tried to kind of foreshadow in the memo that we're going to be putting out an RFQ to hire a water treatment plant engineer who would be coming in and helping us sort of do a modernization study for what does need to happen. Looking at all the potential flow changes, potential water quality threats. The world that we live in now is not the world the last time they rebuilt the plant in the 1980s. Interestingly, this winter we've been seeing higher turbidity levels because of the flooding. So climate change may play a role, and so we might need to tweak the technologies that we're using, or at least have a plan for if X, Y, and Z happens. How are we going to do it? Because we don't have a lot of space at the waterfront, unfortunately. So gonna have to be creative.
Councilor Kane?
Thanks. And would we need all three to back up, like temporarily replace the
the three turbines?
or like would one or two be enough to like?
I think you said two.
Two for sure, and then one as a backup in case one of them ends up being down for repairs again. We're gonna need, we'll need two for sure.
To meet typical flow, yes.
Yeah.
I forget how much you said one produced like 3.
One do 4 million gallons per day. Our average annual flow is just under 4 million gallons a day. One will do 4, but then depending on time of year, you need a second one to run in parallel.
Unless we do some sort of conservation notice if we were in a real situation.
So the third would not
Backup.
backup.
Yeah, but they would all be exercised, right? So that at any one time, we're not gonna let them, let what happened to them before sort of sitting there and seizing up happen again.
I just want to add, as we think about how the city will change in the next 40 years, we have a lot of other things happening to our city that will maybe change the demands on our water system and what we, not only climate, but people and densifying and what else might be happening in the future. So the Board of Finance 40 years from now, hopefully will be set up for success. Any further questions or discussion from the board? Councilor Travis.
I know it's in the memo, but just in terms of your expectations that this rebuild will fit with any generational modernization to come. Can you speak a little bit more as to what those expectations are based on? Like, well, how are we sure that this work will not be all for naught? We're having to do that one generational project.
Obviously, like the future, we can't really say right now what the future is going to hold, whether or not we're going to, the plant that we have right now, parts of it originate from 1908, the original water treatment plant, and it's been upgraded over the years. I can't say right now what the future holds is whether or not we're going to continue to work within our existing footprint or if we have to move elsewhere. But as long as the treatment plant is where it's at, we in order to take down a 1908 clear well, we need to have this capability.
I guess perhaps what you're talking about, the main future thing that would affect these pumps would be flows. And even with running 2, if they both do 4, that's 8 MGD. That's very much further out into the future. The chances that Burlington would get to that level of flow, we've been starting to do some calculations. Steve's been looking at our remaining capacity and then looking at the projects that we know are coming, and even sites that don't yet have a project, but we suspect will become a housing project, and making sure that we're not going to be in some sort of major crunch situation really quickly. But I think with these 3 pumps being backup pumps, right, being able to run 2, you'd be able to get up to 8. And yeah, so we don't have any concerns about this being a misstep for where we may be going. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You wrote something about it in there, but
Water will always need to be pumped uphill.
yes.
That won't change.
Any further, yes, Council Barlow?
I will move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the director of the Department of Public Works to award a contract with Corrosion Products and Equipment for up to $182,500 to complete the rebuilding of the water plant's 3 vertical turbine finish pumps, subject to the final review and approval of the city's attorney's office.
Thank you, Council Barlow. Is there a second? Councilor Carpenter? Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
6 items, and our apologies to our CEDO friend, Director.
Well, you're the one that tried smoking in the middle of that.
I know, yeah, it's happened in Board of Finance meetings where someone starts smoking.
I know, I was like, who's smoking?
Happens all
I
the
know
time.
this is my first.
Right out there.
But really, it's on there.
It's like, I don't I have this personal drink.
Not always cigarettes.
And I know we're on fire.
Cigarettes, not always, okay, good to
Yeah,
know.
we don't
Know the orientation. All right, moving on to our last item on the agenda. Ryan, can you win the prize for patience today? Thank you very much. We're on to item 5.1, the sale of 200 Church Street, and our CEDO Director, Brian Pine, is here to kick off this item.
Thank you very much. For the record, it's Brian Pine, Director of the Community and Economic Development Office. So tonight's really a discussion of a piece of city business that isn't really in our wheelhouse per se at CEDO, but we took it on anyway because the prior mayor saw a real need for the city to grapple with this piece of real estate that has been a piece of city property since 2005. City acquired it as part of its efforts to stand and human resources moved into offices. And the city decided it was important to retain this property when the Burlington Telecom workout restructure because of the Citibank lawsuit for returning $33 million that was owed to Citibank. One of the outcomes was essentially Burlington Telecom was sold to a holding company called Blue Water Holdings. And part of that deal was that the real estate assets could be held outside of that transaction and the city could retain it. So that was a bit of a victory for the city. And the goal was to keep the city departments that were operating out of that building in place and not cause disruption. So that was 2014. However, as I identified in the memo, the asset purchase agreement that BT eventually executed with the city in 2017 made it clear that Burlington Telecom is a part of a company that has a business model that requires them to own their properties, if you will, their real estate. They don't lease their properties as a matter of course. They operate their network operation centers out of those properties. As a result, they need to have control over the property. They really aren't interested in a lease arrangement, and it made sense for them because we'd already invested significant resources into creating that network operations center that continued to be the home of Burlington Telecom as a service provider. So they put it in the agreement that in 2029, they have really what is kind of referred to alternatively as a right of first refusal, but it's really more of an option. And the difference is a right of first refusal means if I own a piece of property and Councilor Travers has a right of first refusal, if I decide to sell, he gets to make the first offer. And it has to be reasonable, it has to be market driven. But if you have an option, he actually gets to exercise that right without whether I put it on the market or not. It's essentially what the difference is here. They have really more of an option. And they've indicated that they fully intend in 2029, and I think the mayor might be locked out of this meeting. Figured that out. So fast forward to 2029, that would be their plan would be at that time to acquire the property. However, today we face at least $1 million in capital upgrades for the property. One is very urgent, and it's at least $1 million and maybe slightly more to replace the HVAC system before the cooling season begins in the coming months. In addition, there's a roof that is at the end of its life. It can probably squeak through a couple more seasons, but not a couple more years. And that roof replacement is estimated at between $125,000 and $190,000. So it's really close to another $200,000 of capital improvements. And I'll just pause and say this is where it's a little bit, well, I'm going to admit it for the city that we don't really do a great job of setting up reserve accounts for buildings that we own. We operate them and we take any revenue. So if you think of Letty Arena generates revenue from skating and all the other activities, it doesn't necessarily go to a reserve account to improve and upgrade Letty. Same with 200 Church. So revenue has come in, it has gone to the general fund, it hasn't been set aside to maintain the capital assets. So this means that the capital BT's been paying the city. Okay. We've been operating as a piece of commercial real estate essentially for that entire time. They pay about, I think it's about $10,000 a month to the city to own that to lease that property because they lease the whole ground floor, which is really the basement of the property. That's where all their equipment is. The other ground floor, because it's the Church Street, this goes way down into the ravines. This is an unusual property. The Church Street side is the Community Justice Center, payroll, and HR. And then upstairs is all of BT's back, office staff. So we have this situation we're facing with the need to upgrade the building. Also, fast forward to 2025, at the end, if all goes as planned, CJC moves out and moves into a brand new building, more appropriate, more suitable office space at the former VFW, which is a Champlain Housing Trust redevelopment that's really exciting. It includes space for the veterans and a community kitchen, the CJC, and then four or five stories of housing, 4 or 5. That's about to, I think it's probably going to break ground pretty soon. So that's coming right up. As you all know, we have very constrained bond capacity. We have the high school bond. We also have the expiration of the sustainable infrastructure bond. So our sort of normal capital allocations are about $2.5 million for streets and sidewalks from the streets and sidewalks tax, and an amount which varies year to year for other city properties, parks projects, city facilities, fleet, all the rest is very constrained, and that's limited by our ability to issue annually the borrowing the city does outside of doing a big sort of voter approved bonding. So that's the reality that we're facing, and that's what's driving all the work we've done to get to where we're at now, which is concept, or we've laid out for you in the memo, was essentially a negotiated agreement, and we wanted to get it on the table and start getting a sense of whether the Board of Finance, the mayor, the council supports this direction.
Thank you, Brian. Are there questions or discussion from the board? Councilor Carpenter?
So BT or whatever we're calling it, is committed to keeping that equipment in that building?
Absolutely. Yeah, they just relocated everything out of.
We should maybe, if we want to talk, I know there's not many people listening publicly, but we should take that discussion into executive session as Scott Barker has asked us.
Okay.
And actually, I have a couple other questions about the due diligence of the city that they might have done for other real estate possibilities.
So let's see if there's any questions to be able to stay in public session before going into something that is regarding real estate transactions and negotiations that would disadvantage the city. Are there any questions from you, Councilor Carpenter, or others that are more on the public scope of things around the building or things that Brian has spoken to already? Then we can entertain that in a moment. Do you have anything more in a public realm, Councilor Carpenter?
Just confirming that the transaction with the CJC is final, and they have confirmed and will pay the operating rent for that program out of their own operation. That's sort of all I'm doing.
Great question. That'll be coming to you soon. We have a letter of intent that we signed between the city and Champlain Housing Trust. The details of the lease are being worked out right now. We have created revenue sources, not city revenue, to fund the fit up of the space, which is about 4,000 square feet. And there's the fit up, and then there's the ongoing rent that will be due. Because of the investment in fit up, it will hopefully buy us a lower rent to the CJC. Right now, the CJC gets, it's a great arrangement. The city basically says to CJC, here's your space in 200 Church. It's $21,500 a year, but we're going to give it to you as part of our match. It's needed to match the state grants that CJC gets. And so that's part of what is in the mix right now. Their increase in rent, though, will go from that number up to about $60,000 to $68,000 annually, roughly. So it's a significant increase. And the way that CJC budget is structured, it will require essentially building it into the cost of offering that service and getting that funding from the three main sources that fund the CJC, which are all state sources: so the Department of Corrections, Attorney General's Office, Department for Children and Families. But we're still in the detailed negotiations around how to get that number down for the annual rent. But they're committed, and they've designed the space for CJC to be there. And it's really an obligation that, the current spaces, people are sharing offices. They shouldn't be. They're crammed in, and they have a lot of confidential discussions going on in spaces that don't have sound attenuation. It's a really unworkable space that they're in right now.
Any other questions for the public realm, Councilor Carpenter, before I?
One more related to BT and.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Did I see your hand, Councilor Barlow, Councilor Kane?
Mine are more related to real estate.
Okay, Councilor Kane, anything on the public realm? And I do see your hand, Councilor Grant. Hold on one moment.
So, thanks. The air conditioning replacement is cited as a reason to do this now. I am wondering, how big of a deal it really would be if the building didn't have air conditioning. I'm wondering, how that relates to, the possibility of hybrid work for folks in the CJC and HR and BT. Like, if the indoor temperature were to go above a certain threshold, I don't see that in Burlington, Vermont as being catastrophic, the risk of an air conditioning not working. There's no AC in probably most buildings in this city.
It's actually not true for office spaces. It's fairly standard to have air conditioning here, but it's also HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So it's really not It's about indoor air quality. It's about moving the air in and out of the building adequately. It's about ventilation, moisture, preventing mold. So there's a whole bunch in the HVAC that's not just.
What was that
based-
number?
1.2 million.
Effectively replace the HVAC or?
Yes, and it's at the end of life. It won't make it through this season. So it's gotta be this.
And even
And they-
pretending we could go without air conditioning, we certainly can't go without heat in Vermont. And this is at end of life, like we've said, it can't go into the summer. And I think even if we were willing to say, okay, HR, you still have to come in, CJC, like these are not great. Unfortunately, the departments that are there are not great for hybrid. They're all people that we really need in the office. But come work without AC, by the time we get to October, we have to have heat.
We also couldn't do either because PT leases from us and part of the lease deal is they get
And
a building with HVAC. So you can't
HVAC is,
you can't take that away from them and expect them to stay in the property.
and for the equipment that's there, air conditioning is absolutely critical.
Is that Councilor Kane? Yeah, okay. Councilor Grant?
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what I'm reading in the documents that were required. So according to the deal that was made with regards to the sale between the city and Blue Water Holdings, we'd have to sell them the building anyway in a few years. Is that correct? Is that what we did?
Yeah, and it's actually I think it's a three-way agreement with Burlington Telecom or Shores, the company, the parent company, Blue Water and the city. But that is correct that in the beginning of the third 5-year lease period, which is 2029, their option would be effective then. So we'd be obligated to sell to them.
What are we making on the current lease? Or are we?
Right. It's
Would not.
$120,000 a year.
Yes. On the current lease, their payment, as CAO Shad just confirmed, is $120,000 a year is what they pay.
Do you know what market rate is?
Yeah, I mean, that's where we start to get into some details that we'll share with you. In the appraisal process, they look at these issues of market rents and comparable properties. It's pretty close to right around there. Yeah. It's on the low end of market because it's, our office space is classified as Class A and Class B. And because of this space, it's called Class B.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Are there any other public facing questions before? Councilor Travers?
I just want to confirm briefly, Director Pine, something that's in the public facing memo indicates that if the Board of Finance is supportive of this, that a purchase and sale agreement could become before the full council at our meeting on May 6th.
Yeah.
Does that timeline still work from your perspective?
Very much so. We've been working with the city attorney's office on a specific agreement in case this moves forward, we're ready to go. Part of what was driving it is that you got to go out to bid. I mean, if this were to happen, BT, before they own the property, would go to bid and pay for the improvements. So the city would not be paying for the improvements, with the expectation that the closing, because we have a signed agreement, would happen. If the city decided to not basically to back out of that, we would owe them the cost of the improvements that they paid for. So that's just.
Okay, with that, Board of Finance. Do we have questions which we think we should be headed into executive session for Brian?
It's hard for me to how to pose this question, but because I'm not immediately concerned about the operations of BT. I'm curious around the discussion of that whole block and what thinking has happened around that. You can advise me of whether you think that's executive level or not,
We talked about that, upper grading, I think that's okay.
Okay.
And when you say that, do you mean essentially the parking that surrounds this building?
yeah, I mean, it seems like an underdeveloped site,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And so, whether we're part of it or not part of it, I don't know if that
Sure.
matters. It just seems like a pretty undeveloped site. And I'm more curious, has this, this is a more generic question, has the city explored other options?
Yes.
That means we've reached our 2 hour.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, not kidding us.
I want to remind the board that we're at 2 hours.
So maybe I can ask you this off. I'm just, are we? On the other hand, and we don't own the parking lot, I get that. But sort of big picture,
Sure.
what does selling this or not selling it, how does that relate to?
Yeah, what's happening around it?
Yeah.
Sure. 20+ years ago, our office and planning zoning at the time pursued what was called a residential high density zoning overlay district to allow for several properties, and that was one of them, to go considerably up over what was allowed before. And that took a long time to get through. It took 2 years to get through the process. And it was not just for the hood plant, but that was a milk processing facility, as you know, facing Winooski Avenue, and then behind it was where all the trucks were coming and going constantly. So that whole stretch of land that goes from the BT 200 Church all the way down to the building at the corner of Maple is owned by a partnership of local people. Who actually, one of them who lives in the hood plant because they renovated and added on to that building. I think with the movement of this ravine sewer, that was the biggest barrier to development. They're going to probably come forward with something in the coming years. Don't have any specifics, but I saw her not that long ago. One of the owners, and she said that definitely it's their plan at some point. So that would be a private transaction with a private developer, and they would, look to do what's feasible in the marketplace.
Yes, I mean.
Yeah. That's a future development opportunity for sure.
Further questions of public facing? I want to remind the board that we have to be very diligent if we are to go into executive session, that it has to be very defined to a real estate related question that would disadvantage. And if we veer out of that, I'm going to have to take us out of executive session. So this is really last call for public. And I'm
asking what you're asking us tonight.
Tonight, I think Councilor Travers asked about whether this would be ready to come to council. The idea would be to bring it to council for, it's the 29th, your regular meeting? Is it
the 29th is Board of Finance.
Finance only, okay. So 15th, I think we'd like to bring it to, that would be where we entertain an executive. We thought it would make sense to do an executive session with the full council.
Next council, right?
April
the
15th is the
right.
next one. April 6th is the following.
I mean, yes,
So
next Monday then.
we have a draft agreement because we've engaged with Eric, in the attorney's office, and I think it's pretty close if it's not final. I mean, not final, but it's ready. All of his changes that he wanted have been incorporated. So we could be ready to bring this at the council meeting on the 15th or following at the meeting on May 6th.
That's the problem.
I would just add to the conversation that since there's probably other counselors who aren't here tonight who want to weigh in on this, that we had one executive session where everybody could.
We might do that on the 15th.
It just might be more productive than having one tonight.
And then, rather than doing it with us.
I would tend to agree. I think would be advantageous for just rounding out the conversation and making sure that we are looking under every rock. I don't know why we talk about rocks, but anyway, I think that would be a more productive use of our time at this point. So I appreciate that. Agree with that.
That would work for us, and we'd be ready for that. If it's the 15th, we're ready. If you can't do it the 15th, because they look at, do you have space on that agenda?
No, I mean, we were planning on the 15th. So we can make it work. I think as you've heard from some of our colleagues in council, the extent it's possible in confidence to share a copy of any.
Oh, you'd all see it in the meeting, absolutely.
Yes,
But we would-
I'm anticipating you'll get feedback from some folks wishing that they had seen a copy in advance, such that they had an opportunity to review it, to bring comments to executive session. And given the tight timeline here and the fact that they likely won't have that same opportunity, if it's at all possible to share.
I mean, I'm okay sharing it if the attorney's office says that's okay for them.
I just, you know, we've heard this feedback from
Right.
other colleagues
Yes,
about these
yeah.
agreements, and I anticipate we'll hear that same feedback on Monday. So
Is it customary to ask the other party if they're okay with us sharing it as long as it stays a confidential document?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's customary.
Customary.
Okay, yeah.
just a suggestion.
Nothing, no reason not to get it in the hands of those of you who have to deliberate on this, so, yeah.
And facing portion of this presentation for the meeting on the 15th, I think that would be helpful as well. And to have it not just embedded in an executive session motion. It could be a brief presentation, but I think it would be very helpful for the public to hear sort of the special circumstances that are leading you to the recommendation that we should sell this asset.
And that's typically how we would do it, is a quick couple slides and some talking about the highlights and then go into executive session. That's how.
Great.
And with that, is there any other further discussion from the board on this item? We have no motion, we have no action needed on this item, so we, at this point, thank you, Brian,
Thank
very
you.
much. Again, prize for sitting through the entire Board of Finance to get there. And with no further business, the Board of Finance is adjourned at 7:36 p.m. Thank you very much.
That's a great thing.